I'm John Brushke. This is the Theater History and Mysteries podcast, and this week I got to meet with Amanda from the Midwest. She got hooked on the Phantom of the Opera at a sleepover when she was 11, bought the London cast recording on a cassette tape and played it till she had all the songs memorized and wore the tape out. Then, after seeing a performance of the Phantom in Toronto, Amanda got to go backstage and meet Kim Stengel, who had been playing Carlotta, and I will let Amanda take it from there.
She was one of the kindest, most inspiring people I'd ever met. I had one negative experience. I will not name the person because I don't want to disparage them in any way, but I had one actor from the show who was, I guess, new to the production and did not have great people skills. When my mother and I were talking with some people and she was saying, oh, well, my daughter sings opera. My daughter would love to be in musicals. She turned and looked at me and just went, you were too fat for this. I don't think that's a good idea. You really should try something else. And it kind of broke me. And it was in that moment that the woman who played Carlotta, it was my first time meeting her, was just like, don't you ever listen to what she said. Don't you ever listen to somebody say that. Don't ever let somebody tell you not to be part of something because of how you look or anything else. Like, no, you go based on your talent. You try, don't ever let somebody make you want to give up. And like, no, that woman was awesome. Still love talking to her to today.
I have promised that this podcast will explore the lessons the different shows have for theater and life, and to explore all those unexpected and unlikely connections that come together when a bunch of humans get together and enjoy theater. To help me better understand all that, this week I reached out to the internet to ask anyone who is willing to share with me their favorite show. And that's it. Not anything deep or philosophical, just why the Phantom of the Opera drew you in. And what I got back was so much more. What kind of people are drawn to musical theater? How does it affect them? How does musical theater fit into a human life? How are those lives changed by it? And I discovered that those lives are changed in ways that I never could have imagined. I thought I was asking what made a show your favorite form of entertainment, and what I learned is how it could change your life forever. And that, my friends, may be the greatest theater mystery of all. I will be your spirit guide today on a totally different episode of Theater History and Mysteries. I'm John Brushke, and you are listening to Theater History and Mysteries, where I take a musical theater production, go into a deep dive on the questions it raises and the answers it provides. I hope that this approach will give a deeper understanding about the lessons that the musical has for theater and for life, and I will never miss an opportunity to pursue any mystery, bizarre coincidence, improbable event, or supernatural suggestion along the way because, in the words of Dirk Gently, it is all connected. So, just to clarify the process a little bit here, I've been covering some of the bigger Broadway musical productions in history, starting with the original books that eventually resulted in the musical, and I end each series by trying to figure out what about the story or production is making it so compelling. I've been relying on books and reviews and my own thoughts to try to answer those questions, but one thing that I've learned living the academic life that I have is that there's always much more to be learned by asking the people who are most closely tied to whatever it is you are trying to figure out. So if, for example, you were studying homelessness, you should go talk to some people who are unhoused. And if you're studying theater, you should talk to some people who watch those musical theater productions. So I reached out to the internet to ask people to sign on and found 5 different folks who are really into musical theater to figure out what they think. Let me start by introducing our cast. And before we meet everyone, let's just remember what binds them together. And the only thing that binds them together is that they responded to a Facebook post asking why musical theater was important to them and what they liked about the favorite show. They have never met each other or even had a conversation. So playing herself in the role, leading role, is Christine.
Okay, wonderful. My background with theater is more like I've been more engaged as an audience than within it. Part of that is just because, I don't know, I had a lot of self-confidence issues growing up. I used to be in choir, but I didn't sing in choir. I would stand there and lip sync because I was terrified that I was going to sound like those people on American Idol who show up and then everybody makes fun of them because they suck so much. So I was too scared to sing. So I just like sat in choir and lip synced as everybody else around me sang. So I had kind of a bizarre relationship with that. In terms of ballet, I was like demonstrably the worst ballerina in my class.
Well, if it seems like she's being a little hard on herself, there is a reason for that.
I had abusive parents and I had a lot of self-esteem issues because of it. So I had this like conviction as a child that I was not going to be one of the special people who could actually do some of these things. I thought there was like something fundamentally lacking in my soul. I'm still somewhat convinced of that. It's lingered over the years, but I'm trying to get over it as I like do my own projects and stuff like that. But I did waste like basically 29 years of my life feeling that way.
That is an awful lot to have to deal with, especially growing up. But theater gave a pretty unique role in her life.
Yeah, basically, I just wanted to be anyone other than who I was. And so whenever there was like a theatrical production I could be in, I sort of left it the chance for it because for a little while I got to be somebody who actually mattered. And I don't know, it just meant a lot to me.
And as she had mentioned earlier, theater wasn't mostly a thing that Christine did. It was what she watched. And there was one particular show that always drew her in.
Phantom, I'm just going to be honest. As you may have noticed, I am autistic. I tend to fixate on things. Phantom was the story that meant the most to me as a child, having grown up in an abusive situation, feeling so isolated and left alone. So I really globbed onto it like a parasite.
And you might have caught earlier that Christine felt plagued by having something missing in her soul, were her words. She makes a very direct connection between that and the Phantom of the Opera.
See, I think the thing about it is whenever you hyperfixate on something, it's not arbitrary because it speaks to a fundamental aspect of who you are. In my case, my marginalization growing up definitely was what drew me to Phantom, because when I was like a young kid, like 6 or 7 or something, maybe younger, I grew up on Cats, and I do like Cats quite a bit. But I wouldn't say that Cats is, a fundamental core aspect of my personality. I think it's a fun show that I sit down in the audience and I watch it and I'm like, yep, that was Cats. I don't, feel this piece of my soul like chained to it. So for Phantom, I think it was definitely the story itself that did draw me in. So I don't think it was arbitrary. I think there's elements of ourselves that we discover through what we latch onto. And maybe it's not, immediately apparent why something touches your soul like it does. But Phantom really did do that for me.
Now, Phantom is not her only passion. And before I tell you what the other one is, I'd like you just to guess, other than theater, what is the one place people go to escape and step into a fantasy world?
My two big things are I go to shows and I go to theme parks. So if I'm not doing one, I'm doing the other. Sometimes I see shows at theme parks, obviously. I just think those in the moment experiences are something special that you can't really recreate in any other medium,
So Christine went to college, got a major in film with a minor in English, worked as a 3D animator for a while. And that last part of our conversation that I'd like to focus on with Christine is the main project that she's working on in her life right now.
I'm unofficially making a Phantom of the Opera fan film. It's going to take about 25 years to be completed. But right now we're in the sort of early pre-production stages of doing research, stuff like that.
Phantom of the Opera fan film. Is it scripted?
Yes, it's mostly animated. I call it in animation because it's not animated in the classical sense. It's more like an animatic, but it's basically a glorified slideshow with illustrations and stuff. There's a little bit of 3D animation that I'm doing, obviously, because that's my background. But mostly it'll be like looking at basically a Disney movie if they ran out of frames.
Okay. That will finish our introduction for Christine, our second episode superstar is Bojana, who comes from a long way away.
My name is Bojana, and I live in Prague, Czech Republic. But I am not Czech. I came here in 2012 to study. And after my studies, I decided to stay. But I'm originally from Bosnia.
Her first exposure to musical theater was actually on film and not in a theater, but she still remembers what happened.
So I would say definitely through movies. One of the first when I was a child, and I think I was transported to that world, was when I watched Mary Poppins. And as a child, I remember my dad was telling me, "Hey, I'm going to the grocery store," and I was just like glued to the screen, not hearing him anything. And he was like, "Hey, I'm talking to you." I was like, okay, sorry. So definitely one of the first. Dancing in the Rain. I was also glued to the screen. I was dancing after watching the movies. I was trying to copy the moves and so on.
And from there, it moved to the production that stuck with her via some old school video technology.
So I went to this rental place and I said, do you perhaps have the Phantom of the Opera? And he was like, okay, but like which version do you need? And, I was very young then. I was like, well, the newest, I guess. And he was like, yeah, actually, we do have it. And then I put it in the, in the computer. But you remember those screens that had the butt?
Yeah.
The old ones. And I played
big, deep cathode things. Yeah.
Exactly. And I played it. And yeah, that was it. That was the love at first sight. First watching.
So as she moved from childhood to young adulthood, Bojana found herself transfixed by film in particular, and also drawn to musical theater and the Phantom especially. But she wasn't growing up just anywhere. She was growing up in Bosnia in the 1990s. And just to give us all a brush up on recent political history, when communism began crumbling in the late 1980s and middle 1990s, Yugoslavia separated into several different states, one of which was Bosnia. And that all happened amid one of the most brutal civil wars in recent global history. Her parents protected Bojana from the war, but it wasn't without a cost. Her father refused to join the military, and because of that, he couldn't get a job.
The politics in Bosnia is very complicated. You first need to understand that Bosnia and Herzegovina, they have 3 presidents that switch. So you have one president is from Orthodox Christian, another one is Catholic, and the third one is Muslim. So they switch every 4 months. And their role basically is to make people divided so that they can get richer and richer. And if people are not divided, their politics won't work. So this is basically, it's been going on since the war ended in 1995.
So this is the world that Bojana was going into when she entered the university. But there she got to work on her own collaboratively produced theater production. It dealt with a very Bosnian topic, and the point of it was to challenge the social structures that were keeping the country divided.
But at the time when we wrote it, which was 2011 or 10, I think it was quite controversial back then because we wrote it, Bosnia was struck by a civil war in the 90s, and you had a war which woke up all the religious and ethnic tensions. And there was a lot of people who, even in the 90s when we had the war, they were the product of the interfaith love. And even in 2010, it was still a bit controversial to talk about this. And you wouldn't know as a child who was born in interfaith or interethnic love, where do you really belong to? Like whose culture, whose faith, whose religion, whose groupation, and so on. So we made the play exactly about this and exactly about people who are falling in love and from within different backgrounds, religious mostly. And at that time, it was still quite controversial. And it was quite controversial because it was coming from a university theater. Then, you had even newspapers writing, oh, this is all like the propaganda. Why would universities, talk about this, and so on and so on and so on. Why would the theater be political? But actually, it wasn't political. It was a play talking straight about love. You had lots of monologues from real people, from real stories, telling their side, how they grew up in such kind of family, which is multicultural family. And it was quite interesting piece to work on. And I remember working, with all the guys and the editors and everything for like until 3 or 4 a.m. every day on it, just so that we could bring it to perfection. And even though it was that controversial, we had the opportunity to tour all around the country. And it was actually a big success. We were very, very happy about this.
So your role was as author. Did you perform in it also?
Yes, I also performed in it. I had an opening monologue. I will tell you, it was very interesting. In my city, there is, there is a fairy tale called Safikada. In Bosnia, in the medieval times, was under Turkish Empire. And lots of people who are ethnically actually Slavic in Bosnia, they took Islam because we were under Ottoman Empire for like 400 or 500 years. So this was a natural course of events, right? So it was actually a story about Bosnian Muslim girl who falls in love to Austrian soldier, but who goes to a battle and dies. And then she was promised to another man who was from Bosnian Muslim heritage, but she wanted to stay loyal to him, and she kills herself. I'm not sure if it's ever gonna change, to be honest, but yeah, we can stay hopeful.
Okay, before we close out our introduction of Bojana, I just want to say that I hope you are enjoying her accent as much as I am, and I don't want this moment to pass without saying that she can speak like 4 languages, which is both doggone impressive, and 3 more than I can. Our third voice comes from Brittany, who I'm embarrassed to say I don't have audio for. She was calling on the phone. It wasn't a full Zoom call, and I was too used to things automatically recording, so I messed it up on my end, but I did take some copious notes, and I'll be referring to those when I recount Brittany's experiences in our conversation together. So Brittany had a brother who got sick when he was about 2.5 months old, so her mom moved in with her grandmother. Her biological father was never part of her life, so her mom and her grandmother took her to see Joseph in the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat when she was 5. She had learned theater etiquette, and she actually started crying when the last song started because she knew the entire score and she was sad that the show was about to be over. The cast saw her crying, brought her up to the stage to be a part of the final megamix, and she was hooked on musical theater from that point forward. But sadly, that amazing start to musical theater fandom was not typical of her life. Brittany has a nonverbal learning disability and struggled with directions and social cues. She'd also survived 2 surgeries, one of which got botched. She was teased and bullied. She was called retarded, stupid, and slow. Because she was neuroatypical, it took her longer to learn things, and her neurological issues weren't diagnosed until just before high school. And to compound the rest of all these issues, Brittany's mother abused her, and it was her grandmother who basically raised her. When her mother took her to see Phantom when she was 9, her mother did not tell Brittany about the chandelier falling in the opening of the show, kind of just to make sure she'd be scared, and it worked. Brittany was badly scared by that chandelier effect. And Brittany and her grandmother could only really relax when her mom was out of the house. So when her mother moved out for good, when Brittany was about 19, that was actually a relief. But that Phantom production stuck. Even at the age of 9, she could connect with somebody else who'd been abused and was trying to fit in. She couldn't really put it into words at the time, but she was in survival mode when her mother was around almost all the time. So going to the theater was a relief because she knew that her mother would not harm her in public, and she could just enjoy the show, get transported to another world, maybe even another reality, at least for as long as the show lasted. Being who she was, Brittany became obsessed with the Phantom. You know, her phrase is hyper-focused. She exposed herself to every possible bit of Phantom content, including a CD that she carried with her to school. Her mom would get mad about her Phantom obsession, and when she brought a copy of the Phantom of Manhattan to her school, the book, her classmates and even some of her teachers teased her about it. One of the students who teased her went on to borrow her Phantom of the Opera CD and then broke it, which was very sad for Brittany. And I could see, most of us at the age of 9 would not react to that well. But these memories are all fragments. Brittany had told me that she only remembers bits and pieces of her childhood, and she had to disassociate from the rest of them to survive. But the Phantom really gave her something to hang on to in order to mentally protect herself. Our fourth leading character today is Holly. She grew up near San Diego, and she could tell pretty early on that she was gonna be into music.
I went to my first musical when I was 8 years old, and it was Annie. That was my first musical. However, I started studying piano when I was 5. I was a classical pianist from 5 on. So the first time I actually was part of a show was when I was a freshman in high school. They wanted me to accompany and music direct Dames at Sea, which I did.
She had been a classically trained pianist, but once she got involved in her high school musical theater scene, she found that there was something fun and new there for her.
I loved everything about the musical theater. I loved story arc where people would expose who they were as characters with the songs that they sang. I loved the music and lyric dichotomy, as it were. Like you could be saying, I'm a happy person, but if the music is not saying that you're a happy person, that gives the audience something to think about. Gee, I wonder why they're lying about being a happy person.
And one particular draw of musical theater was the people that she met when she moved from her role as strictly a classical pianist to somebody who would play for musical theater.
Everyone was very accepting and warm and caring. I would play on the piano and people would come by and give me a shoulder rub as they were walking from place to place. And I made many friends in that community.
She graduated from high school and kept on playing the piano at any number of gigs, but there was one gig in particular that stood out.
I have played out at parties and at venues like hotels. I played in the little restaurant at the Sheraton Torrey Pines for a while, and I did what was called a white party. Everything at the party was white. People were painting a white canvas with white paint, and a fellow was putting on white makeup all over himself, and he stood like a statue. And on the white party, my piano was hanging from the ceiling. I can give you some pictures of that if you'd like to prove it.
I'll just jump in here and add that we do have those pictures, and I have put them in the show notes.
It was very scary. I sat atop a 25-foot ladder, and when I would play, it would push the piano back, and then it would swing towards me, and I'd think, oh, this is going to knock me off the ladder. So I didn't anticipate that. But it was a lot of fun.
Okay, so she's now an adult. Holly attends as many shows as she can go and enjoys meeting the performers after the show whenever she can, which ends up being quite a lot. And actually with some pretty big names, including Patrick Swayze and Christine Brinkley, who I didn't even know had been in musical theater. And she also found some pretty cool ways of connecting with those performers.
I paint a lot of the posters of shows, and then I give them to people who are in the show.
You take the poster that they'd hang in the lobby.
Mm-hmm.
And then you paint over the top of that with, like, I guess, oil.
I just look at it and transfer it to a canvas with eyeballing it up.
Okay. I imagine that's typically very well received.
It usually is. Before COVID, I would bring brownies and cookies to the shows and send them backstage. And then COVID hit, and the way that you approached the backstage kind of changed. During that period of time, they weren't accepting presents backstage because they didn't know if I had COVID or if I was going to spread it around. And it's relaxed somewhat now, but I haven't brought cookies and brownies in a long time.
Okay, we've already met our final performer for the day, Amanda. I can tell you that she's been classically trained as an opera singer for 13 years, and she's still an active performer in her local theater. Let's do a little more investigative journalism here and see if we get to the bottom of that first sleepover and what it led to.
So I was exposed to Phantom the first time when I was 11. It was December of 91. I was staying the night at a friend's house. It was like just before New Year's Eve. And we were super punchy and slap happy. We hadn't slept yet. And she just starts singing Think of Me over and over and over, like not letting me sleep. And I was like, what are you doing? What are you singing? She's like, it's Think of Me. It's from Phantom. And I was like, well, I've never heard music from that. And she went, oh, okay, tomorrow I'm playing you the whole soundtrack. I was like, okay. So she played me the full Canadian cast recording. And when it was over, I just wept. Not because I understood every single lyric the first time hearing it through and like knew the full story, but it was just so pretty. And the music hit me at such a level, I just cried. By April, I convinced my dad to take me to a long closed record shop to pick up the 4 cassette version of the London cast. I played it until it started getting spotty in the sound and my tape player started eating it. And they surprised me for my 12th birthday. They took me to Toronto. And that was the first time I saw it. And it was such a profound experience from walking into the theater that had been refurbished just for the purpose of housing Phantom there. Because before that, it was a movie theater. Before that, it was a vaudeville theater. So they gutted it, refurbished it, housed Phantom there. And it was like going backwards in time the second you walked in the door to getting into the theater itself and smelling the fog. And like it was kind of chilly inside, like they had really good air conditioning. And it just kind of enveloped me, took me back in time. And from the moment that gavel cracked until the curtain dropped at the end of the show, I was just sucked in between the costumes, the lights, the set design. It was completely immersive to me. And I went back to see it another 30 times after that.
All right. I can't let the opportunity pass to talk to Amanda about her experiences with the paranormal. Amanda takes her performing very seriously, and she was working with Stagecrafter Productions in the Baldwin Theater in New Royal Oak. I will let her take it from there.
I was in the downstairs dressing room at the makeup table. I was getting ready for my first show there, and I had my big old tackle box of makeup on the counter in front of me. And one of my rituals is getting to a theater early. If my makeup call time is at 7, I like to be there at 5 because I like to be there when it's quiet and it's empty. Maybe one or two other people are there, but I just like to hang out and be chill. I'm putting my makeup on. I'm talking to one other person who's in the makeup area with me, and I watch my entire tackle box slide from directly in front of me all the way over, all the way across the makeup bench, and just looked at my friend and went, "You saw that, right?" And he was like, "Oh, you didn't run out of here." I'm like, "No, but does this happen often?" He's, "Yeah, sometimes." And it just, yeah, watch the whole thing move and then watch the whole thing move back. Nothing was touching it, just. And then there is a little girl who wanders around. We think she was from a home that had burnt down that was across the street, or closer across the street from the theater, and we think she just ended up there. But every so often you'll hear her cry, just out of nowhere, in the dark, just sounds like a little girl just letting out like one wail, and then it's gone.
She's actually quite an active ghost researcher. She does paranormal investigations, records strange sounds at night in graveyards, and has stories to tell about all of that. But we're here to understand how these 5 different people explain their connection to the Phantom and what drew them to that story. Our roll call is now done, and our full cast of characters includes Amanda, who gave us our opening, Holly, the classical pianist, Brittany, whom I failed to record, Christina, who's working on her 25-year-long Phantom film project, and Bojana of Bosnia. With our cast of characters firmly in place, let's move on to the central question at hand. What is it about the Phantom of the Opera that makes it such a compelling production? And in fairness, I want to say that Holly, our classical pianist, wasn't responding to a post about the Phantom of the Opera per se, but she does have a pretty solid general theory of what makes musical theater work in general.
I gave it some thought. And I think that when I go see a musical, I'm getting either entertainment or education or both at the same time. Edutainment.
All right. If you could describe for me some of the education you've received while attending musical theater.
I learned a lot from Stephen Sondheim. I consider some of what he does not musical theater, more like opera, Pacific Overtures, for instance, and Sweeney Todd. And I learned about Sondheim how that you could make words rhyme by breaking up the words. He has a poem. To find a rhyme for silver or any rhymeless rhyme, all it takes is will, verbosity, and time. So he chops up the word verbosity and rhymes silver with will, ver.
You find the plots of the shows educational? I guess you mentioned.
Yes, sometimes I do. It doesn't have to be always educational, but I enjoy the educational ones. Hamilton taught me a lot that I didn't know about the country's history. And things like Little Shop of Horrors, for instance, that's a retelling of Faust in a totally different way, with the doo-wop girls and the big plant that eats everybody. And the final number is don't feed the plants. So they're saying, don't make a deal with the devil. You're not going to win.
Good life advice, that. Stay safe out there and do not make any deals with the devil. Holly thinks that good musical theater educates and it entertains. So let's start with that and ask her fellow panelists what they have found educational or entertaining. Now, there's a lot, and I've noticed that I have a tendency to start listing an enormous number of possibilities as I'm talking through them and stepping through them each one at a time. But with apologies to the Count from Sesame Street, let's not get too obsessed with the exact number. Just want to appreciate the richness of the show. I am going to number them as I go, but that's really just to mark that the theme is shifting. I just want you to sit back and hear all the parts of this production that struck a chord. I learned a lot from the different perspectives. I hope you will too. So to start off with, there's just the education. Brittany, who you'll remember had survived the abuse of her mother, describes that part of her mental condition was that she was obsessed with learning, and the Phantom of the Opera opened a chance to learn about a different time period and what life was like back then. For Bojana, the entire point of her show was to educate her country about interfaith relationships.
Exactly. We wanted to explore this taboo topic. And not just that, we also wanted to simply bring the reality up, because we are, the society or the politicians or whatever, they're acting like, no, we are not mixed up society, where actually we are. Everywhere you go, on every step, you have people who are either children that come from a mixed faith marriage, or you have people who are currently in a mixed faith marriage. This is a constant, daily life. I don't know anyone from my country that doesn't have a relative who has a different cultural or religious background. So we simply wanted to be like, hey, you know what? This is the reality of our life, everyday life. And this is our reality. Like, stop putting it under the carpet. And this was the main goal, basically.
Christine also mentioned that theater is basically watching people work through some kind of issue, which of course is pretty extreme in the case of the Phantom. But I'll just say that theater, at least if it's being serious, always presents an opportunity for some kind of emotional learning. And it's almost always exaggerated. It gives the audience a chance to think through some issue that resonates more generally. A second thing that resonated, and one that I hadn't expected, was the character Christine. I left my own explanation for the success of the show at the Phantom, and that's a couple episodes ago. The Phantom is the unique and the dominant character, but that is definitely more true of the character in the book and the silent movie, and Christine has a lot more going on for her in the musical. Our Christine, that's Christine with a K, by the way, talked about the way the character Christine struck her in this excerpt.
Yes, well, Christine and the Phantom are kind of the same person in a way, because Christine, obviously being a woman in that time and, coming from maybe not like abject poverty, but certainly not being well off, being a nobody in the chorus, that kind of thing. That's why the bond between them is so strong, because they're basically the same person, just one is more flamboyant than the other one. Well, I mean, they're both marginalized. They're both extremely lonely. They're both mired by trauma. And in Christine's case, she has like a come to Jesus moment and gets over it, or at least learns to face it in some capacity, lingering trauma aside. The Phantom eventually does face it too by the end. Obviously, it's a little late for him and he's gone too far by that point. But they share, the marginalization is primarily the main thing. Their passion for music, obviously a shared interest, all of that stuff. But also the fact that they are both stagnating. The Phantom is stuck in a situation not by choice, although partly it's arguable how much of a hand he had in it as well. Christine has been stagnating for about 11 years because of the death of her father. So they're both sort of frozen in time and stuck in this stasis, not knowing where to go from there. And then they find each other and they form this kind of codependent, toxic bond because they're like mirrors of each other, which obviously mirrors are a huge thing in Phantom. And obviously it's very intentional and all that stuff. So yeah, I think Christine in a way is like what the Phantom would have been if he had had a better chance at escaping his situation, because she very easily could have become like him.
And Christine's central role is that she's an object of obsession for the Phantom. Amanda had the insight that this might actually be relatable, which is something I think I intimated in my take, but Amanda puts much more centrally.
Personally, I think, psychologically speaking, I think everybody wants to be loved, regardless of who they are, what their passions are, how weird they happen to be. They just want that love. They just want to be accepted. They just want someone to love them back as much as they love somebody. I also think, like from Christine's point of view, well, maybe not her point of view, but from the outside looking in, everybody also kind of wants somebody to love them that much, or until they've experienced that level of obsession. I think there's a lot of people that just want somebody to think that they are awesome, the greatest, like, you inspire me. I wrote this whole opera for you and I want you to be in it and you're amazing and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that you're a star. I mean, I think people want that.
Now, I think it is really Bojana who has the deepest read on the relationship between the Phantom and Christine. She's thought about it a lot, and I am frankly impressed with where she lands. It is one of those things that seems obvious when you hear somebody else say it, but it takes a pretty bright person to arrive there. For Bojana, Christine is central, and the plot climax is not really about what the Phantom has done, but it's all about Christine's choice.
But I also personally think that what is so astounding for the Phantom is the choice that Christine makes at the very end. Because there are so many of us who wanted the Phantom to be the choice, but then at the end she makes the choice to be Raoul. And even though we want this, we know that in a way, Raoul, it is correct choice for her. And I think the mixture of feelings around this is what actually draws us so much to it, to the story. And then, of course, it's with the music that amplifies all these emotions, all these thoughts. And I really think that the whole thing is about the choice at the end. What gets us all twisted around, because you start thinking, what if she chose Phantom? But why did she chose Raoul? But what drawn her to the Phantom? And there are so many logics why she goes with Raoul, but there's also it is so also logical why she goes with Raoul at the same time. So it's quite, I feel, complex topic and complex, notion of it.
So I guess my first question is just, but for you, Raoul is still the right choice.
No, for me, no. I don't look at it that way. Definitely not. I'm Team Phantom all the way.
All right.
I'm the person that says screw Raoul, and every time he appears, I'm just like, go away.
It is a complex choice indeed. And I'll bet if you polled the audience members about who they'd choose, the overwhelming majority would end up right where Bojana is. The smart choice is probably Raoul, but if you followed your heart, you would pick the Phantom. Now, in there, Bojana mentioned how the music amplifies all the emotions, and music is a third and common theme. So let's go ahead and let Bojana finish her thought.
Yes, you have also amazing music. I mean, the overture, when it starts, it's almost haunting. It's almost evoking you to something. It's summoning you to, your soul starts flying, because it has such a powerful effect. But I feel that the core of it is that choice, of course, accompanied by everything else.
That theme that Bojana's talking about there, the overture, that was one that I had not expected. But when I posed my question on Facebook, a whole bunch of folks responded that their favorite part of the show, and maybe their favorite part of any show, was the overture. Now, that's strange to me, because to me, the overture had always just been about the band warming up. I didn't even really ever think of it as part of the production proper. But to many people, it's the thing that sets the stage and starts to pull them into whatever alternate universe the show is trying to create. And much like Bojana, for Holly, the music hits her in a especially powerful way.
I can't be anywhere that there's music without paying attention to it. If I'm in Target and they're playing some music, I listen to it without even thinking about it. And I'm thinking about, oh, this song is something that I know, or, oh, I don't know this song. If I'm in the car with someone and they happen to turn on the radio, that's where my ear is. Well, what's happening on this? What song is it? And do I know it? So with me, the music started very early. We had an upright piano in the house, and I would go to it and reach up and play the notes. And I asked for those piano lessons as early as I could, as soon as I could talk, which I got. So I think I was always meant to be in music.
So for Holly, it seems that she's into music generally. It hits her in a powerful way, and it is something that the Phantom music has hit her. Amanda similarly connects to music in a deep and powerful way.
Me personally, I'm someone who gets goosebumps from listening to music or just hearing like a really good chord. Like, to me, music just hits me at my core very deeply. I can't say exactly what it was about the score in particular, other than there are so many layers to it. It is so intricate. Musically, it makes sense. Wish I knew how to describe that better.
All right. So I do think it means something that for people who are really, really into music, who find themselves physically changed almost in the presence of it, they are drawn to the Phantom. The music of the Phantom isn't just good. It seems to be transcendent in a way that really moves the people who are most moved by music. Okay, I don't really have a good transition here, but a fourth theme among the audience members is just how tight this production is. Since I can't really articulate it, I'm just going to go ahead and throw the ball to Christine right here.
In theory, to the stage show filmed, there's quite a few changes in that fundamentally misunderstand, what the show is about and why all of the plot beats work. Because when you watch the original Phantom, no second is wasted on anything. It's a very tight story. The character beats happen in a certain order, which of course they threw out for the 2004 movie. And it's such a delicate thing, it's like a Rube Goldberg machine. If you take one element out of it, all of a sudden the whole thing doesn't function.
Now, if that isn't exactly saying that the whole is better than the sum of the parts, it is definitely saying that the particular pieces of this production really fit together in a way that makes the whole thing better. Here's how Amanda put it.
But I also think that between Lloyd Webber's scoring of the musical itself and the lyrics and the way that it all kind of came together, it was like catching lightning in a bottle. Lyrics may have changed here and there, but I do remember Lloyd Webber saying something about the fact that musically speaking, he has never changed anything. It's like the one musical that he wrote that he didn't change. Musically, he didn't change it. And I'm kind of glad for that, because I think everything musically just flowed beautifully. But then their set design and their costume design and their lighting design, everything was so lush and beautiful, and the costumes themselves are so intricate. And it is kind of a feast for the senses between the costumes and the sounds, the sights of everything. You can feel the heat coming off the stage. You can, when they use their pyrotechnics, I think there's so much, it is so much of a spectacle that it seems to just really suck people in. I mean, 30 some odd years on Broadway, more than that in London. It had 10 years in Toronto. I don't think it's ever been hurting to try to sell out tickets, as far as I've ever heard. So yeah, I think it's all of that. I think it's just this beautiful combination that you don't see very often.
And for Christina, that overall harmony in the way the individual pieces come together creates for her a sense of magic and spectacle.
I don't know, this might be unique to me, but whenever I went to see Phantom, there was a certain feeling it would evoke in me. Like, when I was there to see Phantom, and it was like Christmas almost, where when you're a child, I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but there's a certain feeling that comes with the holiday where it's like you're in a different mode almost. Same thing with Halloween, stuff like that.
For Boyana, who describes herself as a filmaholic, all of this comes together better in the film than when she saw it, albeit only one time on the stage.
I think because I'm such a film fan, I think the movie did a better job in simply portraying emotions. And I think the sceneries simply have better effect than in theater. This is my opinion. I would prefer to watch the movie anytime. Maybe because this was the first time I met Phantom. This is why I'm making this choice. It could be because I still go back to that time, that first time, and the first emotions it evoked. But to me, it simply has more effect and it's more profound than the theater. But I would also like to say that there are certain productions, like for this one that I saw, which was Phantom on Tour, which are complete horror, and then like which completely dehumanize and delete the value of art.
There is one other thing that Boyana points out that is unique about the Phantom as a romantic lead. He is
ugly, but not ugly enough to be rejected. This is my notion also on it, because he presented Phantom as quite a dominant figure, quite a genius, accomplished person, actually. He ran the theater. He had a quite big salary. He wrote operas. He was also a successful magician. When you see him, even in the musicals and in the movie, he's this dominant figure that, rules the room. So I think that there's the key. He made him ugly, but not ugly enough to be rejected from the public, the way the book and the movie perceives him.
That is one feature of the show that does set it apart. The musical is definitely a romance, but the male lead is appealing, but not attractive. That dualism, a romantic figure who is ugly and ugly enough to be rejected by society, but not so ugly that he can't be loved, that's something that makes the show work when the production hits exactly the right nerve. Now, there is one final unique take on this, and it is a little darker. Remember that Amanda is our opera singer come psychologist. We've noticed that people who feel like outsiders can relate to the Phantom, but it's a little more than that. They like that he's getting a little bit of revenge.
The Phantom's nature of retaliation appeals to a lot of people as well. I didn't get what I want, I'm going to make you give me what I want, because everybody wants to have a temper tantrum at some point and just make things go their way, and it very rarely does. But I can say that, yeah, of course, there's been times in my life, and I'm sure everybody else's, where they've just wanted to have a tantrum because things aren't working. That character just had very big tantrums and, dropped chandeliers on people and threatened to kill them and tried to hang people. But yeah, there definitely is some kind of revenge stuff going on there. I mean, you see it really from the very beginning between Carlotta and Christine, or more just Carlotta in general, Carlotta in the world, of just wanting everything to be her way. And she throws tantrums and she doesn't get things her way until she does with Prima Donna and then going into a Muto. And then it ends horribly for her anyway, because the Phantom gets revenge and then has Christine play the role he wanted her to play anyway. I think that some people find that at least satisfying, I would say, with the show. I think that's a satisfying thing for some people.
All right. So now before I move on to some final thoughts, I do want to say the one uncanny commonality that these folks shared was their connections or lack of connections to other people. In my previous podcast, I'd expressed this idea by saying that we all can feel like something of an outsider at least part of the time. But for others, for some people like Christine and Amanda and Brittany, it's much more profound than that. Here is Christine explaining this idea.
Not initially. I mean, it took me a long time. I did not find out that I was autistic or queer, for that matter, for God, I must have been in my 20s or something. I didn't really keep track of it, but I knew there was something different about me, and I knew there was a reason why I wasn't making friends. People thought I was a little bit of an oddball. And so obviously Phantom, it's the same kind of story, with Christine, who doesn't really have a place in the world. And then all of a sudden, there's something that lifts her out of obscurity. It's kind of a Rudolph or a Dumbo situation, which those were two stories that I latched onto as a child as well. And the unfortunate reality of that, though, is that in real life, a lot of people will not get that magical lucky break, the thing that makes them special, And I think I had quite a sad childhood because I was always waiting for that moment where I would be able to prove my usefulness or humanity to people. The whole thing. I don't know if you've seen that Rudolph image with the text that says deviation from the norm will be punished unless it's exploitable. It's a grim way to look at the story, but it's basically true because, here I was as a child waiting for that one moment where I would actually mean something to someone. And of course, that never came because we don't live in a fairy tale world.
And here's the thing. I know this doesn't happen for everyone, and it never really fully clicked for Christine, but one place that the oddballs can find what Bell Hooks has called a home place is in the theater. Christine does say that the theater was a place where she could be somebody else for a while, and for her, one key lesson was this.
I don't know. I think it taught me that nobody is really alone, which probably in an alternate universe, I would have become a Sondheim fan.
That was Christine's experience, of course. Now, Holly wasn't coming from the same challenging place that Christine was, but moving into new arenas is always a little bit scary, and I think it means something that she remembers how welcoming the musical theater kids were. She was transitioning from classical pianist to musical theater musician, and she found that it was a place that she made friends. And for Brittany, the theater was even much more than all that. She had always had problems with directions and social cues. She was teased. She was bullied, called retarded, stupid, and slow. But now, today, she unabashedly has what she calls her dream job. She's an usher in the very same theater where she first saw the Phantom, and she's found a home amongst her coworkers, and she speaks glowingly about the company that she works for. One story that she shared with me was that she has a coworker who usually works on the subtitle machines, is very sweet, and has some gravitas on the set because she had previously worked on a TV show. And when she had heard about Brittany's background, they clicked almost immediately, and her new friend shared how much the Phantom of the Opera had meant to her as well, gave Brittany a hug, and shared that she had also survived some abuse. Brittany was thanked for being open and honest, and that was a real meaningful connection that she made with one of her theater cohorts. Brittany also has a special respect for Anna O'Byrne. That's an Australian soprano who made a name for herself playing Christine in the Australian version of the Phantom. O'Byrne is deeply involved in the disabled communities, will stop a show if she sees harassment happening, and she won't sweep disabled people and minorities under the rug, and that means a lot to Brittany. In the end, it Took Brittany much longer than those who are neurotypical to learn things, but she has learned the theaters that she works in and takes a great pride in helping enjoy the shows and the joyful experiences. This episode started when I went to the internet and asked others to share with me what struck a chord with them about the Phantom of the Opera or about theater in general. I have learned so much that Christine, as much as the Phantom is the character that people are drawn to, that the music, starting with the very overture, has a special place for those attending musical theater productions, and that the Phantom music is especially poignant. I've learned that this production is an especially tight fit so that aficionados like Christine, Boyana, and Holly could appreciate the unique and powerful ways that all the elements pull together and make more of the whole than is true of the parts. Boyana can make a powerful case that it is Christine's choice and not the Phantom's mania that is the true turning point of the show, and Amanda's insight that what some people are drawn to about the Phantom isn't that he's an outsider, but he's an outsider who gets revenge. All of those things have added layers of meaning to the show that I had not originally imagined. These are the things I learned about the theater and about the Phantom in particular. But in the end, there are two lessons about life that I have encountered here that have really stuck with me. A theater production is at its best when everyone is included and feels part of the production. When Holly crossed over from classical piano to musical theater, it meant something that everyone was so welcoming and accepting. When Christine needed a place to be someone else for a while, it was important that theater was a place to do that. When Brittany was struggling to find her place, it mattered that her fellow ushers were so welcoming and accepting, both of her and her Phantom of the Opera obsession. In school, she'd actually been teased for it, but when there was a gift exchange at her work and someone was going to give away a book copy of The Phantom, everyone in her work pod immediately just pointed to Brittany. They knew who the Phantom fanatic in their midst was, and that didn't make her weird. That made her special. And finally, it mattered that Boyana had a place to make her statement about interfaith relationships and that the people she was working with believed in the project as much as she did. Theater can be at its very best a place where those who can't find acceptance anywhere else can find their crowd. Theater is a place for the creatives, the artists, the activists, and the oddballs. Long live theater. And the most important point is the raw power of a simple, positive act of kindness. Amanda opened this show by telling us how profoundly Kim Stengel's act of kindness had affected her. It mattered to Holly that when she met Patrick Swayze and Christine Brinkley and the cast of famous folks that she sent paintings and cookies to, that they were kind and appreciative and welcoming. Brittany was deeply touched by the kindness shown to her by her subtitle machinist. It was a hug that meant that she belonged somewhere and at last. Christine learned from the Phantom that nobody is truly alone, and the act of kindness doesn't even have to be directed toward any specific end. It can have positive repercussions even that are never imagined by the person doing the act. Anna O'Byrne took a stand for those facing special challenges, and it moved an usher from Denver who that she would never meet. History has many lessons, but one of the most important ones is that an act of kindness has ripple effects that spreads goodness. How important are those acts of kindness? Amanda opened this show for us, and I'm going to go ahead and let her finish it.
Like, if I get really, really honest with myself, when I was younger, in middle school and in high school, I dealt with a lot of depression. I was clinically diagnosed with depression, and I had a lot of learning disabilities. I am autistic, and I struggled very, very hard. And I found out that singing and acting was one thing that I could do. And theater was one thing that gave me something to hang on to when everything else felt like it was falling apart. And, seeing Phantom a couple times a year also gave me something to look forward to and to hold on to, of like, okay, this is hard and it sucks and everything feels awful. But if I can just wait a couple weeks, I'm going to be in Toronto, I'm going to see my show, I'll feel great afterwards, and then I can talk to somebody about this. And it kind of gave me something to hang on to and something to do. And then I realized I'm really good at singing. I'm doing really well at this. I might not be great scholastically right now, but in regards to singing, I don't know how many kids my age can sing in 6 or 7 different languages and be just fine with that. I don't know many kids that are singing Mozart. I don't know many kids that are singing Handel, but that was something that I did, and I did it well. And that's what it was for me. That's why theater for me. Plus, it also gave me a chance to not be in my own head for a while. And to, I'm going to be this person for the next 2 hours. But it was also a good way to get, depending on the theater company or whatever the production was, it was a good way to just kind of get feelings out too. It was pretty cathartic.
It's
Yeah, no, I will say theater saved my life. As a kid, theater saved my life. 100%. When I was failing all of my classes, and when I felt like I was failing at everything else, I had that moment of, I can do this. This I can do. This I am good at. I might not have a 4.0 report card, but look at this performance. Who else is doing this? I'm doing this. And no one can take that from me. I didn't cheat. I didn't look at somebody else's paper. It's all coming from me. I am capable. I can do things. And like, yeah, that's what theater meant to me. And that's what still means to me.
How powerful can an act of kindness be? It can save a life. And that is the solution to today's mystery in this episode of Theater History and Mysteries. Go out there and commit a random act of kindness today.